Hello and thank you for tuning into News Today, where we break down the day's top stories with precision and clarity. Without delay, let's explore the headlines first. Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will always be part of India, says External Affairs Minister. Amid Gaza war, the first batch of Indian construction workers leave for Israel. Growing number of US states restricting or banning diversity programs on university campuses. Appeal against Central Administrative Tribunal order in contempt proceedings lies before the Supreme Court, says Allahabad High Court. Total asset monetization program of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways crossed ₹1 lakh crore. India's coal and lignite production hits all-time high of over 1 billion tons for financial year 2023-24. Starting with the very first news. Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will always be a part of India, says External Affairs Minister. The minister's response came after China renamed 30 places in Arunachal Pradesh, which it calls South Tibet. Before proceeding further, let's have a brief look over the long-standing India-China borders dispute. The Line of Actual Control or LAC is currently the dividing line between the two nations. However, the border between India and China is not formally demarcated and there is no mutually agreed LAC. While India considers the LAC to be 3,488 kilometers long, while China considers it to be only around 2,000 kilometers. LAC is divided into three sectors, namely the western sector in Ladakh. Here India considers the Johnson Line of 1865 as the border, whereas China claims the McDonald Line of 1893 as the true border. Then there is the middle sector in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. This area is largely undisputed. Ahead, there is the eastern sector comprising Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. Here, China claims that the state of Arunachal Pradesh as part of the Tibetan Autonomous Region. LAC in this region is along the McMahon Line drawn during the Shimla Convention of 1914 between British India, China and the Tibet. In 1949, when communists took power in China, they pulled out various international agreements claiming them to be unequal. At last, let's also have a look at some key dispute resolution initiatives. These are the 1993 Agreement on Maintenance of Peace and Tranquility along the LAC, the 1996 Agreement on Confidence Building Measures in the Military Field along the LAC, and the 2013 Border Defense Cooperation Agreement.
In another news, amid Gaza war, the first batch of Indian construction workers leave for Israel. The mobility of Indian workers to Israel is being facilitated by the National Skill Development Corporation (NSTC) International, as part of a government-to-government agreement. NSTC International is a not-for-profit public limited company in which the Government of India holds a 49% stake. The government's move of sending construction workers to war-torn zone raises ethical concerns, particularly when India has earlier issued advisories to Indians in Israel to move to safe zones. Let's understand the ethical issues associated with such an arrangement. It upbrings the conflict of life versus living, where the recruits are mostly from the extremely backward sections who are moving to war-torn Israel and putting their life at stake due to much higher wages paid by Israel as compared to the wages in India. It might also lead to exploitation of workers, as many social activists claim that workers from outside of Israel are often mistreated. Lastly, it might resort to moral dilemma, where the workers may suffer psychological trauma from witnessing violence and suffering and also face a dilemma of whether to intervene or report them. Further, let's also discuss the measures undertaken for safety of Indian workers in Israel, which include Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Temporary Employment of Workers in Specific Labor Market Sectors in Israel was initiated for the recruitment of construction workers and caregivers from India. As per the agreement, Indian workers shall enjoy equal treatment concerning labor rights as Israeli citizens. They shall also be provided with proper lodging, medical insurance, and relevant social security coverage, as well as wages and benefits as set out in the law.
Moving ahead in the news. Growing number of US states restricting or banning diversity programs on university campuses. Previously, under diversity, equity and inclusion programs, many American universities had given special consideration to admission of the minority students for bridging inequalities. However, in June 2023, the Supreme Court of the US put an end to such affirmative action in university admissions. So what are these affirmative actions? These are positive steps taken to increase representation of certain historically oppressed groups in the society in areas of education, employment, etc. India too follows its course of affirmative actions with its own distinctions as compared to affirmative actions of the US. Let us understand how these affirmative actions differ between India and the USA. In India, constitutional provisions like Articles 15, Clause 4 and 16, Clause 4 explicitly allows reservation to address the historical discrimination against certain sections of the society. It primarily focuses on socially and educationally backward classes and economically weaker sections through a quota system with a legal upper limit of 50% as set by the Supreme Court in Indra Shawne judgment. Conversely, in the US, affirmative action has no direct constitutional origin and had emerged through executive order and legislative acts like Civil Rights Act of 1964, aiming to combat discrimination against minority groups like African Americans, Hispanics, and women through diversity, equity, and inclusion programs without a specific legal cap on the extent of affirmative action. While both systems seek to rectify inequality, they diverge in their legal frameworks, target groups, and implementation mechanisms reflecting the unique historical and constitutional context of each nation.
Moving on to the next news. Appeal against Central Administrative Tribunal order in contempt proceeding lies before the Supreme Court, says Allahabad High Court. The Allahabad High Court recently held that an appeal against an order of Central Administrative Tribunal while exercising contempt jurisdiction under Administrative Tribunal's 80 Act 1985 lies before the Supreme Court only and not the High Courts. Before assessing the news further, let's understand about tribunal system in India. Tribunals are quasi-judicial bodies created with the objective to reduce caseload of the judiciary and bring in subject expertise for technical matters. Lastly, Article 323A empowers only Parliament to establish administrative tribunals, whereas under Article 323B, appropriate legislatures can establish tribunals. Moving on to the Central Administrative Tribunal or CAT. The tribunal was established under Article 323A, introduced through 42nd Constitutional Amendment 1976. Its jurisdiction includes adjudication of disputes and complaints with respect to recruitment and conditions of service of persons appointed to public services and posts in connection with the affairs of the union or other authorities under control of the government. Coming back to the news now, let's discuss the appeals against the orders of tribunals. In T. Sudhakar Prasad versus Government of Andhra Pradesh 2001, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court held that the contempt jurisdiction is exclusively exercised by the tribunal. It was also held that even though the High Courts exercised appellate jurisdiction under Article 226 or 227 of the Constitution of India for orders issued by CAT, the orders under Section 17 Contempt of the Administrative Tribunal Act were appealable before Supreme Court only. Previously, L. Chandrakumar versus Union of India 1997 restored appellate jurisdiction of the High Courts against the orders of the tribunals.
Moving ahead, total asset monetization program of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways crossed Rs 1 lakh crore. The ministry monetizes its assets under three different modes. First is toll operate transfer mode, under which it gives right of collection of fees for selected operational national highway projects constructed through public funding to a concessionaire against upfront payment of a lump sum amount to NHAI. Operation and maintenance obligation of these projects is also with the concessionaire. Next is Infrastructure Investment Trust. These are investment schemes like mutual funds that allow investment from individuals and institutional investors in infrastructure projects. And third is securitization. In this, certain types of assets are pooled so that they can be repackaged into interest-bearing securities. Further now, let's discuss and understand about asset monetization. The idea of asset monetization for India was first suggested by a committee led by economist Vijay Kelkar in 2012. Asset monetization is the process of creating new sources of revenue for the government by unlocking the economic value of unutilized or underutilized public assets by transferring them for a limited period to a private sector entity. It is also known as asset or capital recycling. Unlike privatization, in asset monetization, the ownership remains within the government or public authority. It focuses upon unlocking value from public investment in infrastructure and also to tap private sector efficiencies in operations and management of infrastructure. It put forward the initiative of National Monetization Pipeline for the period financial year 2022 to 2025.
In the last news, India's coal and lignite production hits all-time high of over 1 billion tons financial year 2023-24. Union Minister of Coal has informed that coal and lignite production in the country has grown by more than 70% over last 10 years owing to favorable government support. The achievement is significant as it will provide the country with energy security, saving on India's forex reserves, achieving target to replace import of coal for power generation by 2025-26, etc. Now let's take a look at the current status of coal sector in India. India has 5th largest geological reserves of coal and is now the 2nd largest consumer of coal across the world. Coal India Limited is the largest producer for more than 70% of coal in India. Also, India imported 217.75 million tons coal in financial year 2023-24 as updated till January 2024. And approximately 77% of total imports was dominated by non-coking coal. Though there is an increase in the production, the sector also faces certain challenges. First is the unseasoned and extended rainfall in the coal-bearing areas. Second, the non-payment of outstanding dues by power sector consumers. Third, frequent labor or industrial relation issues in the coal fields and land acquisition and environmental challenges. Also, lower coal quality with presence of high ash and sulfur content. Lastly, technological obsolescence in mining techniques resulting in lower productivity, higher cost and safety hazards. Wrapping up, take a look at the key reforms undertaken in the coal sector. The Coal Mines Special Provisions Act 2015, which is in place to ensure transparent auction process. The Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Act 2021 allowed composite prospecting license cum mining lease. Ending of the captive mining regime that facilitates commercial mining and sale of excess production. Lastly, single window clearances to streamline and speed up operationalization of coal mines. In today's Personality in News, we will discuss Rukmini Devi Arundale. Recently, a book titled Rukmini Devi Arundale, Arts Revivalist and Institution Builder has been published. Rukmini Devi was born in Madurai, Tamil Nadu. She was an Indian classical dancer and an active member of Theosophical movement. Let's discuss their key contributions. She is known for catalyzing the renaissance of Bharatnatyam. Earlier, Bharatnatyam was associated with temple dancers or Devadasis and looked down upon by society. She is the founder of Kalakshetra Foundation in Madras, Chennai, which impart the young true spirit of art. She also played instrumental role in enactment of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960 by the Parliament. In terms of her achievements, she was the first woman to be nominated to Rajya Sabha in 1952 and was awarded Padma Bhushan in 1956 and the Sangeet Natak Academy Fellowship in 1967. Throughout her life, she denoted values of compassion, non-violence, rationalism, and more.
As we conclude today's main news, let's go through some quick updates. The lower house of the Nepal's federal parliament endorsed the Charter of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC Charter is a foundational document that outlines the goals, principles, and structure of BIMSTEC Group. It was signed and adopted in March 2022 during 5th BIMSTEC Summit. India and Eurasian Economic Union bloc officials held talks to formally start negotiation for the Free Trade Agreement. Eurasian Economic Union is an ambitious project for economic integration in the former Soviet region. Its objective is to create a common market, much like the European Union. Debate surrounding Katchativu Islet has resurfaced, which has been a flashpoint in India-Sri Lanka fishing issue. Katchativu Islet lies to the northeast of Rameshwaram and southwest of Jaffna. The Maritime Boundary Agreement of June 1974 on historic waters between India and Sri Lanka placed Katchativu on the Sri Lankan side. A joint media investigation linked mysterious Havana syndrome symptoms experienced by US diplomats in recent years to a Russian intelligence unit. Havana syndrome refers to a set of mental health symptoms that are said to be experienced by the US intelligence and embassy officials in various countries. It was first detected in 2016 in Havana, Cuba. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has made it mandatory to link CGHS beneficiary ID with the Ayushman Bharat Health Account ID from April 1. The move is aimed at creating digital health identification of CGHS beneficiaries and storing their digital health records. ABHA is a 14-digit unique health identifier number under Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. The Indian Air Force is conducting its biggest exercise, Gagan Shakti, at the Pokhran Field Firing Range in Jaisalmer district. In the exercise, all the major fighter aircraft and modern helicopters of the Air Force will demonstrate their striking capabilities. A shallow fake video of the US Vice President has gone viral. Shallow fake refers to altered media created with conventional and affordable technologies without the help of AI technology. Contrary to this, deepfakes are synthesized images, videos and other media created by the artificial intelligence. Paradip port surpassed Kandla to emerge as the highest cargo handling major port of the country in financial year 2023-24. Paradip port was the first major port on the east coast commissioned after independence. It is located near confluence of River Mahanadi and the Bay of Bengal and is administered by a board of trustees set up by the Government of India. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the links in the description below.